Welcome to another episode of Unsanctioned. Don't forget to leave a like or rating wherever you listen to Unsanctioned. It helps us to reach more people looking to travel down the path less taken. We have a new website where we sell products and services over at www.unsanctionedonline.com.
And don't forget to join us over on Patreon at patreon.com/unsanctioned. The UNS is capitalized, where we have 3 tiers for you to embark upon: the heretic, the malefactor, and the blasphemer.
We have an email. Use it. We want to hear from you. Send us your stories, experiences, questions, and more to podcastunsanctioned@gmail.com. You know me, I'm Sebastian, the Sorcerer of Annihilation. You can find me on social media at sebas_the_storm on Instagram and Threads, where I offer services like divination, spellwork, and sorcery for hire.
I am La Hechicera Len. You can find me on Instagram and Threads at hechicera_Len.
And you can find us, the podcast Unsanctioned, over on Instagram and Threads over at Unsanctioned Podcast. So, necromancy, dead bitches. What should we talking about?
Okay, so fuck. We ready? Oh my god.
No, we're not.
No, clearly not.
Okay, first and
But
foremost, listeners,
Yeah.
I won't speak for Len, but I am extremely sleep deprived right now, and exhausted from work. This full moon, I am the opposite, and I think there are certain spirits within my court that I'm realizing is the reason why this is the case. But like, when people are like, "Oh my god, the new moon, like, energy is like crazy, like, be careful with it." Um, I get that for full moon. Like, full moon is
It's
like,
the full moon, yeah.
which I have seen both, but like, I don't know. There's just some weird, like, I feel so much more comfortable with like a new moon than like a full moon. Full moon, I'm like, nah, no, thank you. Which, like, I have what's called like the werewolf placement in astrology. So like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
very heavily affected by the moon and its phases, especially a full moon. Um, so I'm just like tired. I do not fuck with it. I'm not. This moon in particular was like really rough for me. So a bitch is tired.
I also feel like it being on May Day was auspicious as well. So there's a few things happening there that kind of, because I am feeling very similar. Like, I'm not even sleep deprived. I got enough sleep. I just feel like I didn't sleep.
Lots of spirit flight, lots of things
Yeah,
happening, both in the waking world and the other worlds.
right.
Just a lot. A bitch has been
There's a lot of
busy.
movement there. Yeah.
There is no rest for the wicked. But
Unfortunately, there is not.
truly, truly, we don't get any. That's why we're always drinking coffee and shit.
Mm-hmm.
So today's gonna be interesting. I hope we get to kind of dive into some of the stuff that I really was looking forward to. But we're just gonna kind of dive right in, right? So today we're talking necromancy. We're gonna talk a little bit about necromancy, a little bit about death work. I think this might be one of our episodes that's gonna need another episode in the future because this is something that there's just so much to talk about. I mean, like, actual necromancy, traditional classical necromancy, to more modern approaches to necromancy, to working with the dead, to like graveyard etiquette, to actually using necromantic materia, to performing necromantic types of spell work, to doing all these types of things. Like, literally, there is no way to cram all that in an hour or even like 2 hours. Like, we would need multiple hours to actually
Yeah.
touch base on all of this, um, especially since this can be like an entire practice can revolve around necromancy in various ways. And I think a lot of people don't realize that their practice is very necromantic, especially nowadays, because that word just carries a lot. Um, but I don't. I
Well, let's start there. Let's start with defining necromancy. Where does it come from? What is the history for that? For the word itself?
You tell me, Len.
I tell you. No.
No. um,
I know, I'm just kidding.
but necromancy. Go ahead.
Um,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
no,
I
you
was
go.
so
You go, you
joking.
go.
So necromancy, it's a originally a form of divination. Um, Originally, mancias, words ending in the suffix of mancy, are these types of divinatory practices. So necromancy was to perform divination through the dead. So you would summon the dead person would appear, and you would be like, "What are the winning lotto numbers?" And they would be like, "Here are the lotto numbers," and then you would send them on their way, and you would go win the lottery. Um, or they might lie to you and you didn't win the lottery. Um, but necromancy, traditionally, in the very first aspects, to my understanding of what we see in history, is going to be this word where necromancy is classically like this only to conjure forth the dead for divinatory practices. So to figure out future events or to find out things that hidden knowledge, right? So can you tell me, um, I don't know, is so and so fit to be king? Or is so and so stealing from me? Or other forms of divinatory practices in which you ask for other types of information of the occult sense. So necromancy has been around for a very long time, but we start to see it really kind of catch in like the 12th and I would say more so like 13th, 14th century. And from there, it kind of starts to evolve, especially like in the 14th century, is really when we start to see it kind of change its meaning. So it no longer means in that frame of the 14th century of like, oh, you are conjuring the dead only for divinatory services, but it starts to expand to like include other spirits. So this is where like necromancy gets weird because for a while there, necromancy wasn't just involving the dead. It was involving angels, it was involving demons, it was involving other types of spirits. It was basically working with spirits to conjure them from different types of work. So this is like where this journey of the word kind of gets interesting because like it starts in like the more traditional sense of like, oh, you break down the word death, divination, dead divination, so divining with the dead. Then it becomes from Antonio da Moltimo, his book, the De Occultis et Manifestis, also known as the Intelligentarium. Um, so this is where we switch from like traditional necromancy, and this book starts to include like demonic spirits in various forms. We also see that with the Heptameron. So also starting to include demons and angels and other spirits. So I just want to note too that like a lot of grimoires, I don't want to say all, but like a big amount of grimoires include some kind of necromancy in them anyway. So even if it is working with demons, one of these demons' roles might be to conjure forth the dead or bring a dead. Sometimes they would say it as like, oh, well, this demon will bring forth said spirit from Hades, and then you can conversate with said spirit. And act as the spirit, the demon might act as mediator between you and this dead spirit. So there is that touch there of like the more traditional necromancy still there, but it almost is kind of adapting for like the time frame of like, oh, grimoires are becoming big. Ooh, grimoires are like a thing. Let's fit necromancy within it. But necromancy was something that was a criminal act of at first and foremost. To conjure forth the dead in such a way was seen as like a criminal offense in a lot of places, and was punishable by death. So just keep that in mind. Of course, everything basically was punishable by death at one point when it comes to magic. Um, so that's something to just kind of take into consideration. But, you know, this is something that we do see kind of evolve. And, you know, I think in modern terms, necromancy no longer means either of those. I think the word necromancy just means death magic, death work, in the more modern sense of the last like 40 years.
I agree. It's very much about engaging and interacting with the dead and the things that reside in the world of the dead.
Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
And that's the episode. Bye everyone. No, yeah.
So let's talk some folklore around necromancy.
Okay. I guess we can do that.
I guess.
One of the more recognizable figures in folklore when it comes to necromancy is the Witch of Endor. She had an actual name. I don't remember what it was. But she's the one that conjured Samuel for Saul so that he could ask, "Hey, how is our battle going to go tomorrow?" And Samuel basically is like, "How dare you? You sinned against God for conjuring me from the dead. You're going to die tomorrow." And then he does. So, I mean, Samuel told the truth. So, oh, that's an example of shit. That's an example of necromancy being used specifically for divination. Um, yeah,
Which that is something I we will touch base on later because I love it because a lot of people forget this aspect of like, oh, I'm just going to conjure the dead and then they're going to do whatever. But like, if you conjure up like a hardcore Catholic, they're going to be like, what the fuck?
yeah,
What the actual fuck? Because you're pulling their spirit from or part of their shade, or which is god another thing to talk about, like the different parts of the soul, but we're not there yet.
right.
Is like the idea of like, the Witch of Endor calls forth the spirit, and then the spirit's like, bro, you've sinned against God, what the fuck are you doing summoning me?
Yeah.
And she's like, I asked you a question, bitch, answer. I don't give a fuck. But it's kind of like that concept there is like, these spirits aren't always going to just be like, yes, great sorcerer, I will do whatever the fuck you want because you've summoned me from the dead. Some truly will be like, yeah, absolutely. But some are going to be like, bro, what the fuck? This is like against everything that I stand for, all of my morals, my ethics, my beliefs, whatever. So definitely one of those. So, Len, who is the patron saint of necromancers?
Unofficially, well,
Well,
I mean, not, well, not like in canon, like not canonically a saint of necromancers, but Saint Cyprian is the unofficial patron saint of necromancers. He himself was a sorcerer before he converted, or whatever version of the story you um, follow, you listen to, whatever is your preferred one. Um, but he was a necromancer. So that's why, like, well, and in most of his, or at least all the books that are attributed to him, there's at least some mention of necromancy, and engaging with the dead, working with the dead for various purposes. Um, and he's not the only one that is associated with necromancy, like not the only saint. Though Saint Cyprian is considered like the patron of necromancers, there is also Saint Nicholas, which is kind of weird. Like you wouldn't think that of Saint Nicholas, but there's a story. I don't remember where this come from. Don't stone me. I don't remember where this comes from, but I do know that there's a story where Saint Nicholas had to um, someone was abducting children and then like butchering them and putting them
Krampus.
into, yeah, Saint Nicholas is going to save these pickled children. I mean, that's what
It
happened.
is.
That
It
is what
is. It
happened in the
is. It
story.
is.
The pickled children, Saint Nicholas went to go save them, and um something something, he does the sign of the cross over the jars and they come back to life, which is like, I'm imagining that's horrifying, right? Because they're
Horrifying.
in pieces, and they just come back to life. It's maybe it is explained because I can't think of
They
it,
just
but
come to
like
life in pieces.
that's what I'm thinking happened. But I'm assuming because like through the grace of God or whatever, like he did the sign of the cross, they came back to life, and he was able to put them back together. Like they were able to like exist again or be living human. children. But yeah, so Saint Nicholas brought back the dead.
Unless they weren't living as human children and just became some monstrous thing of children pieces. He said, "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, all the bones taste the same." To Father Johann. That is horrific.
I may have gotten the detail about them being chopped into pieces may have been a bit too much. Like that may not have actually been part of the original story.
Len said, "But I want them to be."
I want them to be. They were chopped up, whatever. Cuz like looking at just a general overview of like the TLDR
Right.
basically. He There was a butcher who killed three boys during a famine and hid their remains in a salting tub, planning to sell them as food. Saint Nicholas discovered the crime, resurrected the children by with prayer, and made them his patrons. Um,
He said, "I brought you back. Now you work for me." He said, "Mhm. We call this indentured servitude."
right,
Um, we're so unhinged sometimes. Anyway, it's so funny because we can
right.
go from like these like educational, intellectual conversations and then be like, "Oh, the bones taste the same to Father Johann." Um,
The pickled
the
children.
pickle children. Casey is crazy. Um,
Casey is wild.
but what about Lazarus?
Oh yes. Um, That's interesting because in what I was looking into, like of course, yes, the story of Lazarus makes sense in regards to necromancy because Jesus Christ, like the story, like in the story, Jesus Christ brings back Lazarus from the dead. Um, but like Lazarus himself is the one that's seen as the necromancer because he came back from the dead. So wouldn't it make sense to like also, because if the patron is the one that actually did the bringing back the dead, people just don't like Jesus, which is like
Right. Like, okay, valid. At least for me.
understandable.
But
Yeah,
like,
right, right.
literally, like, ugh, like what is it? Instead of Jesus Christ Rockstar or whatever, it's Jesus Christ Necromancer. Um,
Yes.
which he was. That bitch loved to bring
Hmm.
shit back from the dead. Which I'm like, isn't that like against the rules of your like father or whatever? Which like also is
But he's
you,
God, so like
right?
he
So
can
he's
change the
like, but
rules.
I'm like, wait, so the rules don't apply to you? So they don't apply to me either. You don't get to do that,
Hmm.
which is why I also will summon the dead and bring them back from the dead. Fuck you. But I think it's funny because Lazarus, right? Like the idea that like the patron's the one doing it, so it would be Jesus. But also, I think because Lazarus has had the action performed to him, he inherently
Hmm.
carries the attribute. So it's like, oh well, like you've been brought back from the dead. You know what it's like. Bring this bitch back from the dead. Um,
Hmm.
like you inherently are God touched um, from necromancy, so therefore you can do
Yeah.
necromancy. Speaking of other cultures, we do see necromancy in various cultures, and it kind of pretty much always, not always, but a majority of the times, depending on the type of necromancy being performed, carries a taboo with it. But one of the
Hmm.
ones I do want to talk about because this is like a fun one. We talk about grimoires and like the implied information, like you just are
Right.
insinuated to know because you're a part of the culture. So it's just like, oh well, like I don't need to tell you that. You already know that because you grew up in this. But like one of the ones that I want to touch base on is if you're working at Arabic grimoires and you're working necromancy in an Arabic grimoire, you are not summoning a person. In that type of traditions, in those folklores, in those cultures, there is no ghost. There is no such thing as bringing the dead back in that sense. Now, you can bring the dead back in the sense of like, oh, yeah, you brought them back. It's them entirely, but there's a risk involved. And I think there's always been a risk involved with necromancy, no matter what culture, but we'll talk about that later. Right now, it is the idea of like, if you were in a house and like the person you're like conjuring, or not the house, sorry, different story. If you're out at the graveyard and you're trying to conjure forth your dead mother or whatever, um, which I don't recommend. Okay, I'm getting sidetracked. ADHD. Um, if you were to try to do that, and a spirit answers and comes to you and is manifesting in front of you, that is actually not your dead mother. That is your dead mother's Karim. And so the Karim is a jinnic doppelganger. So it is believed that we all have a jinn doppelganger, um, and they know everything about us, even what we're doing in the afterlife. So they will pretend to be you after you die, and basically, like, there's also the risk of, like, in Arabic sorcery, of like, if you try to summon your Karim, there's a risk that it can take over you, and it'll like take your place, right? So then it's the like traditional sense of like the doppelganger, like there can only be one, but you also can't really kill your Karim because then you also die. So it's like this crazy like concept. Um,
It's wild.
but you can work your Karim to work for you as like a familiar. So I will neither confirm nor deny, but like if I, for my friends, when I show up in their dreams, but I'm not actively having the same dream, that is not me directly. It may or may not be, I can neither confirm nor deny, be my Karim. Uh, so there is that. um,
Hmm.
there is no, like, you don't have hauntings. Like, there are no hauntings. It is just either jinn or Karims. Sorry, what is the plural for Karim? Or is Karim plural? I don't remember. Um, I don't feel like looking it up right now. But there is a difference between plural and not plural. But you can also have jinn mimicking. So the jinn will also mimic. So you have to be careful because it's a really interesting one in that lens of those types of grimoires that you have to take into consideration. That, like, if it's like, oh, you will conjure forth the dead spirit of so and so, like, no, it's implied that that's not really how that would work, but also, like, it gets it gets a little weird. It gets a little weird. It gets a little blurry in those regards. But most of the time, I'm not going to say like I'm some expert on Arabic grimoires, but it's more than likely the Karim of who ever it is that you're summoning or conjuring, and not them themselves in an Arabic grimoire, because that's like not what's implied, because that concept doesn't exist, right? So there are no hauntings, there are no ghosts. Um, you can't have the spirit of somebody who's passed. It's going to be their genetic doppelganger. Um, so that is something I definitely wanted to bring up when we talk about like different cultures and um, necromancy, but also like in other cultures, necromancy isn't always so taboo. I think two examples is like ancestor veneration. So I think ancestor
Mm.
veneration is not, because there's like taboos around things, right? So like there's like the quote unquote right way to do it and the quote unquote not right way to do it. So I think that's where we kind of see a little bit of difference, because that blends in, like, you can't have that and not talk about like ceremonial versus folk traditions, right? And then we get into the ancestor veneration and stuff like that. So is there anything you want to say about that before we kind of move forward?
No, like, well, yeah. Just because it's not like ritualistic conjuration of a soul or whatever doesn't make it less so necromancy. Necromancy does not have to be ceremonial. It doesn't have to be ritualistic that way. It can really be as simple as like for like ancestor veneration. It can be really as simple as a candle, a glass of water, and a single picture. Um, that is enough to draw the spirit to the space. Well, it depends. It depends on your tradition and all those things. But yeah,
I also want to slightly contradict you. I think in the more modern evolved adapted word necromancy, yes, like it doesn't need to be ceremonial, but in traditionally it was extremely ceremonial. Like it
yeah,
had to be, like, you could not conjure forth the dead without it being ceremonial. But again, like,
hmm,
it's evolved to the point where necromancy just means death work in general, like any kind of death magic, death work. So I do agree, like it can be um, really simple, it can be really complex. It can be as simple as being like, hey bitch, this is yours, I call you forth from the other side, come here later. But yeah,
right.
I do agree. I think too, when we talk about cultures and like ancestor veneration, Latinos we just have such a huge connection to death and
Mm-hmm.
ancestor veneration. And I mean that across the globe. Like, in the sense of like, well, I mean, think about it. We've all been blended together. We all had these traditions. Death is something we're not afraid of. And I mean that for everyone, right? Like Afro Latino, Latino. But yeah, like we just have such a huge connection to death. I think people of color have such a huge connection to death and like ancestor veneration.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I think I can't help but think of like the beautiful graves and like the way that we have such holidays that evolve revolve entirely around this. So like,
Mm-hmm.
Dia de los Muertos, but there's also like it goes further. Like in our culture, like it's not just like, oh, here's like an excuse to party and just leave some liquor out and light a candle and go about your way. But like it gets to the point in certain areas where it's like we actually like exhume. Is that the right word? The
Yes.
body, um,
Mm-hmm.
and clean the bones. We care for our ancestors in that way. We take care of them in various ways. We don't just give them like random shit. We give them the things that will sustain them. We give them the things that will give them life again. So we are performing necromancy in that sense of like we are raising them from the dead and giving them the bodies. We're giving them the sustenance. We're giving them all these different things to bring them life. And it's understood that like hopefully when you die you'll get the same treatment. um and so we see it in various forms across the globe, but I just, as a person who is Latino, there is that tie there for me, and it is close to home to me, and it does mean a lot to
Mm-hmm.
me. um and yes, to be a cliche, that's my favorite holiday. And it means a lot, like that entire time frame. um and so like that is an entire, basically I feel like Mexicans specifically, but like Latinos in general, Mexicans are necromantic in nature. Like it's just inherently necromancy, that is in our bloods. um and I think there's a lot for that, which like we could talk about later, like when we talk about like why are we inherently magical and tied to like the dream worlds and all this stuff. But I think inherently there's a lot of necromancy involved. I feel like, and when you're Latino, and I'm not saying it's always this case, but I feel like you're one or the other. Like you're either very
Mm-hmm.
very tied to dreams or you're very very tied to the dead.
Yeah.
And I am the dead side. Like it doesn't mean that I don't
Mm-hmm.
get dreams. I do. I can, but it's funny because for me, I can always tell when someone's going to die because of my dreams. So it's still the death side. Whereas other people, like my partner and my mother and other people, are very like on the um, dream side. So everything's in the dream. The dream world is very prevalent. It tells them everything. There is no secrets. Everything comes to them in the dream world. They get prophetic aspects in the dream world. Everything, right? Whereas I'm the other side. I'm the death side. Um, so I feel like you're one or the other. But I think one of the things I do want to talk about when it comes
I'm sorry.
to ancestor veneration too, and like these aspects of the dead, is remediation. Like working with the dead. Okay, actually, pause. Something that's contradictory that I do want to talk about. I do feel there's a difference between like full on like conjuration of the dead versus ancestor veneration. Like ancestor veneration is in the word, it's to venerate, right? I'm not asking you to
Mm-hmm.
do shit. This is veneration. I'm not asking you to do anything on my behalf. I am venerating you. Whereas conjuration or necromancy is like, I'm calling you forth, you're going to do something for me. And this is where things get a little weird. The way I was taught was like, you really shouldn't conjure forth people you had extremely close emotional ties with, because it makes you vulnerable. And necromancy can be very dangerous work. Like, for example, we talked about like you're not actually summoning. What if you don't summon the dead? You summon a spirit that's pretending to be this person, right? And you're just so emotional that when you see them, or feel them or whatever, you're not even paying attention to your discernment. So now you're being tricked, and that puts you at risk for various things. You're in danger, girl. You in danger, girl. But truly, I feel like I agree with that. Personally, I will not conjure forth the dead that I have extreme emotional ties to until I know that I'm in a state where years have passed and I know that I can do this without it becoming something that puts me at risk as a conjurer, as a sorcerer. I also refuse, and I teach this profusely to my students. This is something that I will stand by. If somebody has just recently died, do not conjure them. You need to give them time to adjust to being dead.
I've heard to wait at least 4 years, which sounds like a long time, but it's needed. I don't remember the specific reasoning. And like you can make offerings and things to like help them in like before that, but anything like calling on them, praying to them for favors, don't I wouldn't recommend it at least until after those 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, I've been taught anywhere from 3 to like 9 months as like the earliest. Like if you can tell that this spirit has transitioned easily through divination, through talking to your spirits, like for me, I probably would be an easier spirit because like, girl, I'm ready.
Mhm.
But if even if it's like someone like that, like you have to be careful because like there are certain circumstances and conditions in which a person may pass away that can make it difficult for them to either move on or transition easily or not have issues in the world of the dead, all these things, right? So like one of the things is like people who don't know that they've died. You can't just be like, oh, I conjure you forth from the underworld and you've dead spirit, and they're like, dead spirit,
Dead.
dead, who, me? And so that leads to problems, right? And there
Right.
a lot of the times death is traumatic, so there's a lot of trauma around it, so like they've died in a traumatic way. um that's like if you've just been traumatized and somebody calls you up and tries to talk to you, like you literally just went through a traumatic experience. Maybe you need some time to get your bearings and gather yourself and make sure you're okay. um Now again, yeah, this is where I said like it's kind of contradictory because I will I do venerate my ancestors and I do work with them. But like you said, like there was a time frame, there was all these things that were done, there was a lot of work that was performed to make sure that they were good to come forward. The ancestors that I majority work with are not recent dead. They are way far back, so they are more than transitioned into the world of the dead. They've been there for a really fucking long time. Um, but even the ones who are more recently dead, I did not conjure them forth. The only exception I will make for that is if they come to me first and they ask to like work with me or be a part of my systems and whatnot. In that case, I will conversate with them and be like, "Are you sure you're ready for that? Because you like just died, bitch. Like, are you? Like, girl, go get some rest, go get some peace, go relax, um, and then we can
Girl,
talk."
get that beauty sleep.
Literally, I said, this is like retirement. You need to enjoy it.
Mhm.
Don't immediately start looking for something to keep you occupied. But also, like sometimes they genuinely want that, and that's what they are asking for. So I will kind of make that exception. And this is where I'm saying, like, you just have to be careful. Like the not to say that the dead are fragile, but the psyche can be very fragile at first when
Mhm.
it's been transitioned across, right? It's something to be careful of. And so I always tell my students, like, don't conjure somebody who's died. Like if you had a friend who died and you're just so, that's the other thing. Like you can't do something so grief stricken, so in shock yourself, so traumatized by somebody dying that you conjure forth them in that way because it's dangerous. And spirits can be very fragile. I actually have an experience that we'll talk about in the post show. This down that will showcase what I mean by this and people not being careful. And so I kind of want to touch base really quick. I know that I talk a lot about like my war spirits, but a lot of my spirits are death oriented. My practice for a majority of my life was necromantic. So everything was death and associated with death in some way, shape, or form. And also that meant working with the dead. That meant helping the dead cross. That meant standing up for the dead. That meant all these different things. So some of the things that but yeah, so like working with the ancestors and your ancestors, again, one of the things I would make an exception for is like, oh my God, what's the word I'm looking for? Inherited ancestors. Because again, like they've been dead a while, you're good, you're fine, they've been transitioned. Um, and just being careful with that, just being mindful of yourself, your own mental state, your own spiritual state, and the psychological and spiritual state of the person who's died. Um, to help them, again, like, when I'm working with dead spirits, I'm not just walking into a space and being like, fuck you, dead bitch, get out of here. It's, there might be conversations, it might be very gentle, I might be burning incense that can calm a spirit, because in the same way that I wouldn't just walk up to you and be like, hey, your mom just died in a horrible car accident, I'm not going to go up to this dead person and be like, so you're dead. I'm going to ease them into it. I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to, ease them into this because it is hard to hear sometimes, and be like, hey, you've been causing a lot of problems in this space. And I don't think you do it on purpose, but I think we need to have a conversation about what has happened, what is going on, and what can happen in the future. Like, what's the next step? Spirits, I won't lie, there are times where spirits can get very aggressive or very violent, in which case sometimes you can't really help them in that point, like they're just so blinded by rage. The other thing is, if you're not careful with certain spirits, um so one of the things I want to talk about with the dead is like, two is like in regards to like, oh, are you even ready to conjure them or whatnot, is sometimes people refuse to let go of the dead. And so, because they refuse to let go or accept the fact that this person has died, the spirit is trapped and bound by this person to this person. And this spirit who's died just wants to move on. And now, this person who loves them so much is holding them hostage here, basically, that the spirit will begin to become resentful and angry. And if you're not careful, this spirit can become so corrupted that they are no longer human. And this is something that I have unfortunately seen and experienced, is going into a space and people being like, oh, it's the dead. And I'm like, this person's no longer human and they can no longer go back to being human. So the best that I can do is like forcibly put this thing to rest and banish it and exercise it or annihilate it or whatever. It's kind of the same concept when we talk about exorcisms within certain practices. It's like not always so violent. It's always, sometimes it's like, hey, I'm here to help you reach enlightenment. And I can't do that if you're screaming constantly, or like you're just so blinded by violence and rage and hurt and resentment and anger, and hate, that, you know what, let's just move you into the next life, and pray that you can fix this karmically, within some lifetimes, or certain other kind of concepts there. So it is heartbreaking to come into a space to find a spirit that's no longer human, to know that it was once human, because like that's not something you want to see happen to anybody, really. Um, and it just sucks because, as a practitioner, like I can't revert you back to human, like I can't restore that humanity in that sense. There are certain cases where, like, if it's really really early on, like the person still has a bit of their humanity, that you can kind of work it, but once they're too far gone, it's just too far gone. So this is why we talk about like being careful, and dead spirits can also be corrupted in this way by the spaces that they're in, and other spirits that are residing in a space or tormenting the dead. So these are all things that I've had to work with, remediate, or handle in various ways. And this is where I talk about like the more modern approach of necromancy is like anything death work related. And what I mean by that too is like anything death, grief, and mourning related, is going to be like your modern approach to necromancy. But like that's not just limited to like humans either, right? Like you can work dead animals, right? Dead
Mm-hmm.
things. The energy, I hate that word. The energy, but the energy of the moment of death is something that I do want to talk about, and utilizing that in various regards. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because as we're talking about this, like I am not against my relationship with death looks different. And I just want to say that death itself is something that we should talk about.
I agree, because how are we going to have an episode on necromancy and not talk about Santa Muerte?
Like, how could we as devotees just be like, oh, let's just
Literally.
skip over Santa Muerte? Like, she doesn't make her way into every episode anyway. Uh,
Right.
so it was happening at some point. We just actually made space for it this time. Um, so yeah, Santa Muerte. She is death itself. And I think
Mhm.
that is something that we should talk about in the aspect of necromancy. You know, patron saint of necromancy, well, patron saint death itself.
Mhm.
So that's something to address in a number of ways because I feel like there's a lot of interesting modern approaches to her, both in regards to necromancy, but just her in general. So, was there anything in specific around this that you wanted to say, Len?
Like, yeah, Santa Muerte is a she is a full Catholic saint who is death itself, the personification of death.
No, really. Santa Muerte. You know, it's interesting. You know, I she is death itself, but I don't really often go to her for necromancy.
Hmm.
I go to her for like ancestor veneration, but again, like I feel like there's a difference, right? But even then,
Yeah.
like I don't really go to her really for ancestor veneration. Sometimes I do go to her for death work, right? So like again, like if I'm curing somebody of an illness, and I'm going to kill them, or I'm going to kill the illness, so that way there's room for health. That's when I go to her, right? Because she's death itself. So the act of dying, the death of things, that's when I go to her. But as for
Hmm.
necromancy, um, I would usually go to like a crossroad spirit, right? So something I've shared on Patreon, it's floating around my Instagram as well. Is one thing that I've used is the spirit of the boa constrictor, the boa snake, um, the and so serpents in general, but like I do have a lot of relations in various traditions to serpents, but I know that in from what I was taught, spirits that could help with bringing the dead forward from the land of the dead are spirits that traverse both the lands of the like dry land and water. So like jaguars, serpents, pythons, boas, um, birds are really good at like celestial and uh, underworld things because of their nature of like, and I'm talking about like aquatic birds, like ducks. But um, for me, it's the snake, right? So one of my
Hmm.
conjurations, which it has the taboo that it can only be done in the dark. Like it can't be like if you do it somewhere where there's daylight, like it's not going to work. Like they won't come. And so you call forth the boa constrictor serpent, and you tell it like, "Hey, go and fetch my spirits and ancestors from the world of the dead." And so it'll go and come back, and this seal will now be a doorway from which the dead can reside and communicate and venerate and do all these things. Um, that's one of the ways I've done it. There have been a number of ways that I've done this work. When working with the dead and working with ancestors. But again, like I usually go to some kind of crossroads or traversal spirit. Because when you think about it too, like the spirits that are, think of the spirits that handle the actual traversing of spirits from the land of the living to the dead. I know a lot of people think or believe Santa Muerte is the one who comes and will bring you to the land of the dead. That's not the case for me and her. She's told me that's not really how it works for her personally. This is not to anybody else or like whatever. Like she resides in Miklan. Like that is where she is, but she can come up here and do things, but she's not like, for me personally, again, because I know a lot of people are going to disagree. Like she's not up here coming to every person who dies and then bringing them to Miklan. For me, keep that in mind. In my opinion,
Yeah.
IMO. Because I know a lot of these bitches out here are going to be like, "I mean, shut the fuck up." Okay, I don't care. I don't care. I will throat punch you. I don't care. Um,
Hmm.
so that has just been my experience. Like I've been told there are other spirits who will come and gather you. For example, in one of my traditions, there is a spirit, right? And like dogs are another spirit. Like dogs will guide you to the land of the dead and then take you there, and then like, okay, you're here. Good luck. I brought you. I guided you.
Goodbye.
Bye, and then go back, right, and go find the next person. Dog
Mm-hmm.
spirits and death work have a lot together. I just find canine spirits to be inherently necromantic. Um, so again, within my practice, within my traditions, canines are inherently necromantic in
Mm-hmm.
various ways. And I think that's something that you should be working too, is like, what are your relations with different spirits, with the spirits who reside and traverse the land of the dead, depending on what underworld you're working with, like what is that in your cosmology? Where do you even sit in that cosmology? Is something to kind of ruminate upon, to kind of figure things out, because it really does help a lot. And working with your spirits too, and being like, oh, like, so who traverses the lands for me, right? Or like, if you don't have one, who could you call, right? And again, like, we haven't even touched base on like working the dead, because there's like so much to go into that. Like that's a whole nother episode of just working the dead in various ways. Like, okay, so now what is graveyard etiquette? What is etiquette of talking to the dead? What is etiquette? What are herbs? What are materia? But blah blah blah. But these are all things to be like, kind of, this is like, basically today was just the primer. Today is the episode
Mm-hmm.
that gets you ready for us to, so that way when we do talk about this, you already know the vocabulary, you know what we're talking about, you understand what we're talking about. Now, one of the things I do want to say is that I don't think you should be doing a lot of death work and necromancy if your mediumship is not up to. Some of y'all about to be real mad at me, but it must be said. Um, I love that video. But yeah, like, you really need to work your mediumship. And one of the packs that I have with spirits is that when I'm channeling the dead, to confirm and discern that I'm actually talking to the right dead person, um, is that I feel how they died. And this is pretty common across a lot of traditions, a lot of shamanic practices and traditions across the world, is that like, you'll feel how the person died. And so I've talked about this before, but like, some of my most iconic people dying and feeling how they died experiences are like, one time I was performing this work for somebody, to conjure forth a person, to see how they were doing, make sure they were good, if they needed anything to help them move on, whatever, like all the remediation, all of that, and get any messages across from both sides. And when the person I was performing the work, I was feeling the pain, and it was like starting on my left front side and going up my right back side. And I was hearing a phone ringing. And I was like, that's not my phone. That's not their phone. There's no one else in the house but me. What am I hearing? And so I told her, and she goes, he, I told her what I was feeling, and she goes, because of course the client only gives me their name, and date of birth. I don't research anything. I don't look up their obituary. I don't look up how they died. I don't look up anything. I just conjure forth the person. And they were like, oh, he died. He was in his car, and a bullet went through his windshield into his left shoulder and out his right. And then his phone was ringing the moment it happened, because I was calling him. And so, this was one experience that I had. The other was, you start to like build a vocabulary with this to actually understand like different feelings of death and dying, which is a really crazy thing to be like, oh, I know what it feels like to die that way. Oh, I know what it feels like to die that way. um, Someone else I was working with was honestly kind of a skeptic, but really wanted to see what was going on with this person, or like all the experiences that they had. And so I was like, I started shaking, like I was like in the cold, and I was like, I my organs feel weird. I feel very sluggish. I feel almost like high, and my organs, there's just something wrong with my organs, and I'm cold. And there's something about water, like I'm drowning. Um, and the person was like, this person was overdosing with another person who was doing the drugs, and the person panicked and left the overdosing person on the side of a bridge near a river. Um, and the person, it was snowing. And this person was freezing and died of, according to the um, coroner's office, of organ failure. And so that's everything that I was feeling, was like that and like all that. So it can be really intense. I am not saying that you need a pact with your spirits and be like, make me feel how the person died. I do that so that way I have the correct discernment, because things can be really intense, and like so that way I know that this is the correct person, this is the correct spirit, this is all that. Um, and it's part of the requirement. Like for me, like there's a trade-off. Like necromancy isn't just without its cost. I think all magic comes with at a cost, and this is part of that cost for me. It's like, yes, I can conjure the dead and work them in various ways and help them in various ways, but at the same time, there needs to be a cost, and that cost is I'm going to feel how they died, so that way I can have the compassion necessary to help them in the correct way. Yeah, like you can pact with spirits, you can pact with the dead. You don't need to do that. It was just that was what was required of me. It won't be required of everybody. Yeah. Uh, like I said, there's like so much to talk about that we can't fit into this episode. So I'm trying to like pick the pieces that will build a good framework for you for when we talk about the other aspects of death work. Um,
Honestly, I feel like everything that has been said at this point is probably good. Yeah, I don't have anything to add.
Well, that was today's episode on necromancy. There will be more episodes about this. This was just your necromantic primer. And there are a lot of books that I'm going to recommend in the post show. So stick around for that over on Patreon. But next week, we'll talk about the amazing aspect of the paths called chaos magic, which is a really new, probably the newest form of magic that we see today. Yeah, that's what I would argue, but other people might argue different. But yeah, chaos magic, love it, fantastic. It has a lot of great stuff, and you're probably practicing chaos magic without realizing it. So that's something that we will talk about on the next episode over here on Unsanctioned. Don't forget to find our products such as oils, candles, amuletos, spellwork, and divination and more over at www.unsanctionedonline.com. And don't forget to join us over on Patreon at patreon.com/unsanctioned, where the UNS is capitalized. We have 3 tiers for you to embark upon: the heretic, the malefactor, and the blasphemer. For only $3 a month, you get access to the heretic tier, which allows you to be able to watch our post show called Unedited, where we leave things unedited, allegedly, hopefully, maybe. Access to the Discord server, spellwork PDFs, and access to our reviews of books and decks of tarot, oracle, Lenormand, and more.
And at the Malefactor tier for $8 a month, you'll get everything from the Heretic tier, a 15% off discount of our shop, access to a live book club, movie and TV show reactions, and more, a weekly Tona Lamat forecast from me, and your name read in the credits of the show.
And for $13 a month at the Blasphemer tier, you get everything from the first 2 tiers, a 25% off code to our shop, access to our blog post, group spellwork from the both of us, a merch item sent out to you, and a live audience experience in Riverside.
And at this time, we would like to thank our Patreon supporters at the Blasphemer tier by name. To Pablo Rodriguez, thank you for your support and walking with us on the path less traveled.